Finding yourself in situations when you have to put the work in and there's an element of pressure will force you to get things done. And it can help you to learn things that you never thought you'd learn in your entire life. The Actors Workshop is a charity youth theatre in my hometown, and they put on a different play every 3 months. Now, I got involved with the Actors Workshop, it must be about 10, 15 years ago now. And it all started with a phone call that I got from my friend out of the blue, who was a past member of the workshop who now worked there. And he got in touch and he said, "Look, Dave, we are in a bit of a tricky situation at the moment. Would you be willing to play the guitar for this musical that we have coming up in the next few weeks?" I didn't actually play the guitar very much at this time. I'd kind of fallen out of love with playing and I just hadn't picked it up in ages. The show was a musical called The Man of La Mancha, so I went down there and I had a look at the score for The Man of La Mancha. Although there were some tricky chords and some challenging chord progressions, I felt like it was in my wheelhouse. Plus, it was an amateur youth theatre show. It was going to be pretty straightforward, so I agreed to do it. And my mate told me that I only need to come to the show, obviously, the dress rehearsal and the band call. But I'd never done anything like this before, so I decided it'd be good for me to go to some of the rehearsals when the musical director was going to be there, going through the songs on the piano with the singers and the cast. The musical director, who is now a good friend of mine, was the first full-time professional musician that I'd really worked with. So we became friends during this and we got talking, and he told me that they weren't able to hire the full band that a show like this needed. So he pulled a lot of strings and had managed to secure a group of really good top quality musicians to volunteer to come and do the show like I was. So the show may have been an amateur youth theatre production, but it was produced to a very high standard. About a week before the show, I was in a pretty bad place. I was in full panic mode and I was feeling really down about it. I felt more stressed than I ever have done in a musical environment before. And it turned out that although the chords and the chord progressions were tricky and a bit challenging, these I'd figured out and they weren't going to be a problem. But if you know the music in the musical The Man of La Mancha, you'll be aware that there's quite a flamenco vibe to the guitar playing and there's lots of odd meters. And I'd never practiced or worked on playing in odd time signatures before. I just didn't get it at all. And here I was a week before the show, and there was at least half of the music that I couldn't play at all. It wasn't that I was finding things difficult to play, it was the fact that there were these huge gaping holes in my knowledge, and I had no idea how to learn what I needed to know to be able to even play in the show. Everyone at the workshop is always united in this same goal of putting the show on. So there's no time for procrastination, there's no time for egos, you really are in this thing together. It helps people to build relationships because they're all in the same boat, they're all under a certain amount of pressure to put this show on and to be ready for it. And this is what the workshop is all about. So my mate, who was a past member of the workshop, could see that I was struggling. We sat down in his living room for about 6 hours one evening, and we went through the score from start to finish, and we figured out how to understand these strange time signatures together, just so that I could come up with something that would work for each piece of music. Now, I'm not a flamenco guitarist, never have been, never will be, so it would be unrealistic for me to be able to play all of these parts the way they're supposed to be played, but by the end of this particular evening, I had things that worked for every piece of music. So now it was just a matter of getting the practice in to get it done. So I set myself quite a grueling practice schedule for the final week before the curtain would go up. So I'd just finish work, I'd go home and I'd practice for an hour or so. Then I'd go to the rehearsals and I'd sit next to the musical director and go through the music with him as he was going through the songs on the piano with the cast. And then I'd go home and I'd practice until I went to sleep, 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours. So I went from being someone who didn't really play the guitar at all anymore and not really having much love for the instrument, to someone who had decided to say yes to a project thinking it would be simple enough to do, to someone who was completely humbled and overwhelmed with the stress and the pressure of not being good enough to do the job. And it genuinely was an amazing experience. I loved every minute of it, and I was really gutted when the show was over. It inspired me. It made me learn new things that I never would have even thought to learn about. and it made me fall in love with playing the guitar again. I'm not saying that people should agree to do things that they don't have the skill set to do, because I did have the skill set to do this job, but there was these massive gaps in my knowledge that I never thought would be needed. And this high pressure situation forced me to learn things that I didn't know. And I ended up enjoying the job so much that I realised that I actually do quite enjoy these high pressure situations like this. It gives you a buzz, it gives you a thrill. So this show, it really did change my life in lots of different ways. I started to volunteer to do more theatre guitar playing. This led to doing paid work in theatres and doing deputy work for bands in the area. It helped me to decide to change my career. It brought new people and new relationships into my life. And sometimes you just need that kick up the arse. Sometimes you need a high pressure situation to force you to leave a comfortable situation and really achieve things.